Hello and welcome to the final episode of the SBK Daily Podcast during Cheltenham Week. I hope you've enjoyed them all so far. Ross and I certainly have, and the viewership has been pretty good, so thank you very much for watching. This is the final episode. Obviously, we're not going to be covering any Cheltenham previews because this is the final day of Cheltenham, but we will be talking about some of what's happened at Cheltenham on Friday, some big shocks and some good talking points, as well as looking ahead to 2026. Providing an anti-post play, giving our standout performers, a jockey and a trainer that have done well this week, and looking ahead to Saturday this week and providing a nap and a next best. All of that will come up in the next 10 to 15 minutes or so. Ross, Friday, dramatic again in the big race. We'll talk about the Gold Cup in a second. How has the day been for you so far? Very well done with some of your winners.
Yeah, it's odd, TC. I've had 3 winners. Should be absolutely delighted. And I've just watched that and I'm as low as an ant's belly. I really am. It's just taken the wind out my sails. I mean, Gavin Cromwell and Mark Walsh, they're like the man that shot Bambi, aren't they? I mean, can you imagine the atmosphere now? I mean, and he was beaten on merit. There was nothing about it that was a fluke. You know, the horse travelled through the race beautifully, quickened up the hill on livelier ground. He won the Kimura last year. I mean, how well handicapped was he this time last year winning the Kimura? But that was on a bog. And he's done that on probably the quickest grounds I've ever raced on. It was a really big performance, and he wasn't even in it 2 weeks ago. Had to supplement him. It's bizarre, and it's been a week of bizarre stories, isn't it? But yeah, a bit deflated, but I'm trying not to let that take away from the fact it was a really good winning performance. But I'm struggling, as you might be able to tell by my demeanour and voice.
Yeah, a couple of things to pick up on here. Firstly, we're not dressed up for this podcast specifically. Ross is doing some corporate hospitality. I've just come from Sky. That's why we're dressed up. Secondly, we're literally filming this 2 minutes after the Gold Cup has finished. So that's why we're a little bit deflated. Obviously, Galopin Des Champs, not from a betting perspective, but just from a racing fan perspective. It would have been great to see him win a third Gold Cup. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. And I know the way you're thinking managed to beat him, but I completely agree. I do think it was down to merit. Galopin Des Champs just didn't jump very well and was always seemingly slightly off the bridle. Paul was never happy with where the horse was. Now, turning for home, it looked like he was back within himself, but I know the way you're thinking is such a strong stayer that there was only going to really be one outcome. We are filming this, as I say, directly after the Gold Cup, so I don't know the outcome with Corbett's Cross. He took a horrible fall 2 out and is down at the moment, so hopefully he's A-OK. But it's just yet another dramatic kind of race. These featured races, Ross, this week. Obviously, we had Constitution Hill falling the champion hurdle on Tuesday. We had Tihupu lose at 7-4 in the stairs on Thursday. We've obviously had Galopin Des Champs here, finished second in the Gold Cup at odds on. And also we had John Bond finish second as well. I mean, these proper featured races, the best race of the day, they've not gone the way of the punter.
They've not gone the way of the punter, TC. Absolutely not. And, you know, I think it shows, as we said at the start of the week, we were going to try and find prices, you know, in the race where there were short price votes because there are no such thing as certainties in racing. And that's been borne out this week. I think the sport will be better for it going forward. I heard a lot of people say, I'm not going to Cheltenham this week. I can't be bothered to watch a load of odds on favourites win. Well, you haven't had to. So maybe next year, if they've got the sort of customer facing point right at the track, bit more exciting racing. I think the changes to the handicaps have worked. I think we need to look at the Mayor's Chase, take away the penalties for certain, you know, maybe move that to another meeting. It doesn't really add much, I don't think. I like the Mayor's Hurdles, but yeah, hopefully it'll build the sport forward. And we've now got, you know, a king. Can he come back and regain his Gold Cup?
Yeah, exactly. It'll be interesting to see how they campaign. I know the way you're thinking. Obviously, he's in the Grand National this year. Next year, will they come back to the Gold Cup? I anticipate Galopin Des Champs will. Hopefully, Factor Fire will be in there as well, and it could be a really good race. Right, let's briefly talk about some of the other contests on the Friday. You've already mentioned the Mayor's Chase there. Well done. You put up Dino Blue in that contest, and she won for JP McManus, who's just had a great Friday, really. We should also talk about the triumph with the battle between Lulamba and East India Dock, and then somehow Poneros coming from nowhere to win 100-1 for Willie Mullins. It's been a day of good results, but that triumph result, I don't know where that came from.
Oh, well, he was a classy horse on the flat, wasn't he? But I mean, I went back through a few. I can't see a horse that's won the Triumph on its first ever hurdle start. It's absolutely bonkers. And presumably as well, was pretty unfancied within the camp with John Joe O'Neill Jr. on him. You know, he sort of worked his way through the Irish jockeys that he rates and then landed on John Joe as an extra. It was a good ride. You know, he took his chances. Maybe they got racing a bit quick off the bend, but I don't think Lulamba was stopping. I think East India Dock was. I was a bit disappointed with him, and I just don't quite understand when he was travelling so well while Sam didn't. He seemed to stick doing, he wasn't filling him up, but he wasn't going on. And I just wonder whether doing one or the other might have changed the result. Maybe I'm talking from my pocket, but I think they throw up some nice horses. I mean, Lambert ran really well on just his second hurdle start in the UK. Poneros wins it on his hurdling debut. It's absolute madness. And then on from that, the Mayor's Chase, yeah, I mean, Dino Blue was comfortably the best horse in that race, wasn't she? And she proved it. She proved it last year. It was the ground that beat her. And then obviously the county hurdle, that was a decent result with Cargizi tanking through that race. Again, she didn't finish overly strongly, but she had enough class. Nadawi, I'm sure if they'd have run him in the right race in the Coral, he'd have won that as well.
Yeah, I was going to move on to Cargizi. Another good selection from yourself. Classy Animal, and Willie Mullins just dominated that. Ethical Diamond placed for me, but no match for the eventual winner. And a quick word on Jasmine DeVoe.
Yeah, it was one of those ones where, if you'd have asked me this time last week, you'd have not even been on my shortlist. And I watched it back, and I actually did a little piece for social media about the difference in the courses, and it really got me thinking about maybe this is a horse with an engine. Went back and watched the bumper earlier in the week, and yeah, he was really good. It was a brilliant ride because he didn't jump particularly well at crucial stages, particularly the third last, but he got smuggled into it, and he's clearly got an absolutely humongous engine. If they can tidy his jumping up, Stayer's hurdling division looks fairly open, I would suggest. So maybe he'll be one for that next year.
Yeah, great selection there, 11-1 in the daily podcast that was published yesterday from Ross. Brilliant selection. We have both ended this week in profit. Ross more so than me at this stage. There is still 2 races to go, so we don't know the official figures, but both ended in profit, which is great news. Ross, the 2025 Cheltenham Festival as a whole, what was your personal highlight, firstly? And secondly, which jockey, trainer, either or, really stood out to you this week?
Fact to File was my personal highlight, TC. It was good for me financially, but it was more, this game is a game of opinions, and social media can be a toxic place at times. And we had good fun on the podcast. I enjoyed that sort of batting it back and forth. But there's some people that really sort of tell you you're complete clowns. It was personally quite nice to have called the right race, and B, I sort of stuck with him. He was a brilliant performance, and maybe he will step up to the Gold Cup next year. Like I said on the podcast, Imperial Commander did it, won the Ryanair, stepped up to the Gold Cup. The issue we have obviously is all the good horses are with JP and those green and gold. Are they going to want to have 2 really good horses in the Gold Cup? But maybe we'll come to that in a minute with some future selections. And as for a trainer jockey, I mean, Paul Townend hasn't had it all his own way this week, has he? But I think when he's had the chance, he's taken them. Willie Mullins is just on a different stratosphere to everyone else. And I have to say, I mean, it was only a handicap, but it was a Cheltenham Festival handicap. I think Paul Nicholls probably walked out of Cheltenham yesterday feeling pretty proud of himself. He's clearly done a good job. I had a friend who saw Corber Potter at the sales, and he said his front feet, there was more filler in his feet than there was hoof. So clearly that do an awful lot of work to get him right. Trainers often talk about it being a big team performance, and I think it probably has been vets, physios, farriers that have got that horse to win at the Cheltenham Festival.
Interesting, isn't it? When I asked you about jockey and trainers that really stood out to you this week, I didn't anticipate you were going to come down on exactly the same people as me, really. But I've got the same people written down. I've got Paul Townend and Willie Mullins, obviously for dominating insofar as the leaderboard. On Willie Mullins, by the way, some people were anticipating the likes of Gordon Elliott and Nicky Henderson to throw it down to him this week. That didn't transpire. And the other people I've got written down are Paul Nicholls and Harry Cobden. Paul Nicholls, not so much for his success this week, but more how he's handled it, considering how many times in the past he's had all the leading contenders. This year he didn't, but he said that's just racing and took it on the chin. Harry Cobden, because I thought the ride on Caldwell Potter was one of the best that we saw all week. And my personal highlight from a horse perspective and a punting perspective was probably Bambino Fever in the Champion Bumper. Not quite sure why. Maybe just because it was a really tricky puzzle to solve, and finding the right Mullins horses is tough. But I enjoyed that one the most out of all the winning selections. From a superstar perspective, completely agree with you on Fact to File. I thought he was the most impressive and most dominant horse that ran at Cheltenham this week. He was brilliant. Okay, we're going to end our Cheltenham Festival 2025/2026 talk by mentioning ante-post play for next year. Do you have one?
I do, TC. I mean, wouldn't be mad on it. And I was just trying to think about it. I mean, up until the Gold Cup, the Jukebox Man was going to be my ante-post play, thinking that he'd take on a sort of Gallop and Chomps going for 4. But I know the way you're thinking has slightly torpedoed that. I might come back to it later in the summer. So I'm going to go in Majborough for the Ryanair chase. I'm taking the Tom Collins theory that, of course, Fact to File stays the Gold Cup trip. He'll do it next year. Fact to File steps up to the Gold Cup. Majborough steps from the Arkle to the Ryanair. I thought he showed a huge ability in terms of his engine to get so close in the Arkle, having demolished the second last as it was. So him for the Ryanair, up in trip, and then maybe he'll be a Gold Cup horse for 2027.
Very interesting then. Majborough for Ross. He's going to have to jump a little bit better, but we've got a whole year to sort that out. My ante-post play is going to be William Money, who goes for the Arkle. Managed to snag a bit of 25-1 directly after the Supreme. I think he's currently 16-1, which is a very fair price if you can grab that. I like the way he shaped in the Supreme behind Quebec to Board, who I don't anticipate will line up in the Arkle. The Arkle generally sees a small field, and William Money is the perfect type. So hopefully he gets into that race. The prep obviously goes well, gets into that race next year and can run well at a double figure price. Okay, let's look ahead to Saturday now. Obviously, it's a bit of a deflating period of time, isn't it? Cheltenham Festival ends, everyone basically spends the whole jump season building up to the festival, and then it's over, and then it's Saturday, and you're thinking, well, what have we got on offer? It's actually a pretty good Saturday if you like racing at Uttoxeter and the Midlands National, as an example. There's a couple of other very competitive and rich handicaps on the card. We've also got jumps racing from Kempton and Newcastle, as well as over in Ireland, and all-weather racing if you fancy it, Ross. Where's your Napa next best on Saturday, please?
So they're from Kempton in Uttoxeter. I mean, like you say, it's sort of the end of the week. I was thinking of actually diving into the YouTube comments, and we've got some quite true tips in there and just grabbing two of theirs, but I didn't. I did my work. The nap is in the 3:57 from Kempton, and it's Kingston Pride, Nicky Henson, Nico de Boinville. He was disappointing at Sandown last time on desperate ground. He's run really well in bumpers and his maiden hurdle on decent ground. Quebec Cross is in here, should make it that he's a bit of a price because Quebecois, sorry, is a pretty decent horse, but I think he's a stayer in the making. He'd prefer a bit more cut underfoot. I think Kingston Pride would be too quick for him. So he's the nap in the 3:57. And then the next best is in the 4:45 from Uttoxeter. This horse of Richard Hobbs is called Jupiter de Board. Fairly new horse to him from France. Has jumped like an absolute bunny twice around Warwick. Really improving. Young horse. He's changed hand over fist since he's arrived at Richard's Yard. I think he's quite a nice horse going forward. Still on a fairly low handicap mark. Freddie Mitchell takes over, claiming £5. It was only £3 last time with Dylan Johnston. Freddie Mitchell, good claim for his good value for his £5 claim. I think Uttoxeter will suit, and so he's the next best.
Kingston Pride and Jupiter de Board for Ross on Saturday. Both are fairly short in the market, but hopefully at least one, maybe two winners for Ross to end the week, where Ross has had plenty of success over at Cheltenham. My nap is going to be Joya Machan, who runs in the 225 at Uttoxeter. He could have run in a couple of the handicaps at Cheltenham this week. Connections opted to go to the 100 grand prize at Uttoxeter instead. I tipped him last time at Ascot when he ran a good second behind Alto Belly. Thought he was very well in that day. Why would I disagree with that now? I still think he's very well in. I think he's been plotted at this race, and hopefully Joya Machan around 4-1 or 9-2 could win that contest at Uttoxeter. And my next best is Phlegmatic in the 320 at Kempton. We've been talking about this horse on the podcast for the last 3 or 4 months. He ran second in this contest 12 months ago, off a £10 higher mark. He's £10 lower in the weights now. Surely he's well handicapped. I understand he's entering his veteran years, but I thought last time he actually performed pretty well considering he wasn't ridden to have a chance in that race against much better horses. And now he's back to his favourite venue over his favourite trip, and hopefully he should go close. And Michael O'Connor, who does comment, I have not copied you, I promise. I already had the selections written down, but we're on the same wavelength, Mike, so that's absolutely brilliant. Okay, that's the daily podcast done for this week. I hope you enjoyed them, as I said at the top of the show. Please whack a like below if you did. That's always well received from the camp here at SBK. A reminder that SBK is offering a couple of offers actually this weekend. Firstly, a 20% Saturday Racing ACCA boost for those who opt in. Look, ACCAs, we've talked about it all week. It's not always the way to play, but if you land one, you get a 20% winnings boost there on your ACCA. So that's what you need. And secondly, all new SBK users will get £40 in free bets when you sign up for the first time and bet your first £10. You should definitely take advantage of that. Finally, you can listen to all of these SBK betting podcasts in the SBK app. Just go to the horse racing page and listen by clicking play. Thank you very much for watching this week if you're watching on YouTube or listening on the SBK app. As I say, I hope you've enjoyed them. Next week, we'll be back with our standard schedule, just one podcast a week, as well as Miller's Movers, of course. And that'll be on Thursday. Jess Stafford, I presume, is back in the hosting chair. So we'll see you then.